You know, I have to ask, do you think this is an artist's representation of a battle from the American Revolution, or do you think it's a Walmart on Black Friday?
We'll go with Walmart.
I'd say they're probably pretty similar. So, for about as long as I can remember in my life, history has always been the subject that's most fascinated me. For most of my life, my two favorite eras of study, I should say, would be ancient Greece and World War II, which just could not be further apart from each other. That is, until about 2 years ago, when I first experienced the lovely work of art that is Hamilton, the American musical. Since then, I've seen Hamilton twice, and I've listened to it probably 50,000 times. So through that, the American Revolution has become something of great interest to me. Well, this week, Michelle and I are both in Virginia. This is where she grew up, and I'd never been, so I thought, hey, this could be fun. What I'm particularly excited about today, though, is we're going to some pretty historically relevant places. One of the places we're stopping is Yorktown, which is, I believe, the location of the last major battle of the American Revolution. And we're also going to be stopping in Colonial Williamsburg, which is basically a colonial town, just still around. Needless to say, the history nerd in me is just overflowing with excitement, and the science fiction nerd in me is as well, because honestly, going back to see someplace that's kind of frozen in time is a little bit like time travel. Alright, prepare to make jump, put in all the calculations, just gonna push random buttons here. Alright, here we go. Wow, would you look at that in the distance? It appears to be a British flag. It seems that our time machine has worked. Alright, so, as I stated at the beginning of this video, Yorktown is the location of the last major battle of the Revolutionary War. Conveniently, this location just happens to intertwine my interest in the American Revolution and my interest in the life of the late, great Alexander Hamilton. So now me and Michelle are going to go check some of these spots out, and I'm going to share some of the things that I find the most interesting. So behind me, you'll see a very large hill with just numerous spikes sticking out of it. This is the location of Redoubt 10, or at least I think that's how it's pronounced. For those of you that don't know, which included me 20 minutes ago, a redoubt is like a sort of encampment made, sort of like a fortification that's hard to get to. At the very least, that's what I've seemed to come to understand it as. And this right here is probably the most Hamilton-related section of the entire Yorktown tour that we're going to find. So aside from there being a picture of Hamilton located right there, the reason that this is so significant to the military career of Alexander Hamilton is this is where he staged probably, I think, his only personal military offensive during the entire war. Basically, the entire time, he's asking to, like, lead a command, and George Washington's being like, no. But then at the very end, he finally caved and let him attack this hill. Which, when I say it like that, doesn't sound very impressive. But trust me, it is. Basically, he took 400 of his own troops, with nothing but rifles that had no ammunition and bayonets, and stormed this hill covered in spikes and attacked, like, I think, 70 British offense. I don't know what it says about me, but I think it's kind of interesting that the thing I find probably most interesting about this entire, battleground is a hill. Alright, so we've now made it to the second point of interest that I want to share, and if you didn't think it could get more interesting than a hill with spikes on it, just wait. We're at a field. Now, behind me is the pavilion I was just in, overlooking that oh-so-significant field. Now, the reason the field is so significant is that is the field where General Cornwallis, which, great name, by the way. Anyways, British General Cornwallis, that is where all of his troops marched after they surrendered and lost the war. It's so dubbed Surrender Field, or, I guess in common terms, GG Field. Get it?
Good game field.
Yep. Ironically, though, Cornwallis was too sick to accompany his men to where they came here to throw down their arms and give up. Which, I don't know about you, but that is the sign of some real poor leadership. To lead a team of men into whatever may be ahead of you, it takes courage. You know who wouldn't have done that? Troy Bolton. Troy Bolton would have took his men to the field. Yes, I'm making a High School Musical basketball reference. Alright, so last, but very much not least, on our Yorktown tour of sorts, we have come to the headquarters of the man, the myth, the legend, George Washington, which you may know him as the first president of the United States. I personally like to think of him as the flyest dude who's ever worn a powdered wig. Anyways, somewhere here in this loop is where he was headquartered during the siege of Yorktown. Not really sure where because, you know, history's kind of obliterated everything. Over there is a historic replica of a fence, which is just pretty neat. This is the spot where him and his crew, or I guess staff would probably be the better term, planned for the sieges of Redoubt 9 and 10. Redoubt 10 being that spiky hill I showed you earlier. Anyways, it's just like super cool to be standing in the spot that the very first president of this United States probably stood in at some point. Literally, this exact spot. Right here. Right here. Babe, look what I found. Do you think this is George Washington's Bud Light cap?
I don't even know how to respond to you right now.
These are the jokes. Alright, so we've made it to Colonial Williamsburg, and I have to admit, it's already way more interesting than I had been led to believe. See, when I think of like a colonial historic town, I think of maybe like a nice small recreation somewhere just outside of town. But no, this is like literally the town as it stood, or at the very least like 6 streets just frozen in time. Like right over there is, I don't know how well you can see it, but that is the Williamsburg Capitol building as it stood sometime in colonial America. Obviously this isn't functional, it's very much a tourist attraction now, but the fact that all of this is still here, or the buildings that weren't were so carefully reconstructed, is so dope. I mean, literally just off the main street, there's like actual buildings and stuff of the actual town of Williamsburg that are actually operational today. And a lot of the architecture of that is sort of reminiscent of this, so it blends so beautifully I almost couldn't tell where the actual old Williamsburg started. I have developed sort of an interesting sort of thought line though because of my explorations around this town so far, and that is, even though this is supposed to replicate life in the 1700s and early 1800s, it's making me realize that the more things change, the more they stay the same just forever. In front of us we have our Charlton, which is essentially just colonial Starbucks. It's a colonial coffee shop. As you can see in front of me, over here is an apothecary, which essentially is just like a colonial like doctor's office / Walgreens pharmacy, and then conveniently right across the street for when you're feeling better is a tavern. So you can just get absolutely schnackered. So I'm coming to a bit of a thought on colonial lifestyles. I'm starting to think, and I don't know how historically accurate this is, but I am under the impression that alcoholism was probably a very prevalent issue in colonial times. I mean, really, for example, right over here, this is Raleigh Tavern, which is one bar. Over there is the King's Arm Tavern, which is yet another bar. And over here, it was the bar I already showed you. So really, the colonial bar crawls must have been really insane. Now, if you look over here, we've got James Craig Jeweler, which I can only assume is like the colonial version of like a K's that you find in a mall. Because you know how that old colonial phrase goes, every kiss begins with Craig. You know, I didn't know how I felt going into that joke, but now I'm feeling pretty good about it. Huzzah! Oh look, yet another historical comparison. In front of me you've got William Pitt, which is a merchant, essentially, when we think about it, basically just like colonial Walmart or Macy's. And oh wait, just when we thought we couldn't find another one, another fucking bar. Wow, they're really into alcoholism. Now, this is just something I thought would be interesting to share. Over there, we've got 2 people actually plowing a field with an actual, like, plow and a horse. And then in front of us, I'm assuming, is like, I don't know, the colonial version of an in-ground pool. See, but the real question is, are those historically authentic tarps, or did they just get them at Walmart?
Probably Walmart.
And then last but not least, the coup de grace of inter-history comparisons. We've got Colonial 7-Eleven.
What are you staring at?
Well, there's a sign back there that says cold drinks, and I'm honestly getting kind of thirsty from the walk.
Okay, everything's gonna be overpriced here, so why don't we find like a McDonald's or something?
Like in town?
Yes. Hey, do you have any money?
Currently I've only got 2/3 of a dollar, and it's only good in Maryland, so.
Well, that's not helpful.
Colonial money!